So some of you are thinking, wow, things have really changed. And some of you might be thinking, not so much. I hope you're thinking things have really changed. I want to fast forward you to early 1990s. I was one of those really lucky people. I got some great opportunities. I was reasonably successful, and around the age of about 38, I got this opportunity to work for a large multinational company, branch manager, unionized operation. My background is business management and operations, and I found myself with 220 unionized CAW employees in a big plant. And I was really excited. I thought, wow, this was it. You know, I was going to make as much money as my husband for the first time. That was kind of cool. And female in a male-dominated industry. And a couple of days before I was supposed to start the job, I got a phone call from the fellow who was leaving the role of branch manager, and said, let's go for dinner. I can fill you in on a few things. And I said, okay. So it was a Thursday night. We went for dinner, and the usual sort of, you know, formalities. We talked about a number of different things. He filled me in on this company. And, but I could tell, you know, that he wanted to tell me something. I could tell that there was something underneath that he wasn't saying. And as we approached dessert and coffee, we're sitting there, and he turns to me, and he says, this is going to be the worst experience you've ever had. These people are in open warfare. The management hates the employees hate the managers. It is the most dysfunctional place you will ever work. No, I'm not exaggerating. And I thought to myself, oh my, like, what do you say? I was so taken aback, I thought, you've got to be kidding me, right? And as we talked a little bit through it, I thought, you know, rose-colored glasses, I'm known for that. I thought, oh, it can't be that bad. You know, I can handle this. It can't be that bad. So on the first day, I made every mistake you could possibly make. I wore a dress, I wore high-heel shoes, like that was really silly. It was a brand new building, built to suit. Walk out into the warehouse, and I'm getting a tour. And I noticed this brand new warehouse floor, there's sunflower seeds, shells everywhere, but mixed in with the sunflower seed shells was gobs of spit. And I'm walking and I'm crunching and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna slip. And I thought to myself, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't look right. Well, guess what? He wasn't kidding. I could not believe this place. Within a matter of weeks, I was very aware that something was not right. I would walk down the hall, and under the breath of employees, they would say things like, you won't last more than 18 months. Nobody does. I had a chair thrown at my office door, maybe around week 4. And around week 6, I got 36 grievances on a Friday afternoon, and the rumor was that if they could get me up to 40 grievances, they could make me cry. And I didn't have the heart to tell anyone. I'd been bawling my eyes out since about 10 o'clock in the morning. Door closed. What was I going to do? And I really kept thinking to myself, man, did I buy into this? Like, is this what I signed up for? And it took several weeks for me to kind of come to terms with the fact that what I was involved with. And it really wasn't the 80-20 rule. There was about 95% of the people in this building absolutely hated coming to work. And I thought to myself, how does that happen? So I made a decision around month 3 that I was going to do 2 things. I was going to figure out, how does this happen? How do people get so negative and hate coming to work, especially a large group like that? Because there was only about 4 or 5 people in the whole building that would actually talk to me. And the other thing that I wanted to learn was, what could I do to start building relationships? What could I do to change? Because you can imagine productivity issues, safety issues in a building like this where everyone really hated coming to work. And I won't tell you all the details, but I will say that it took me about 3.5 years to build relationships. And I did all kinds of very unique things. But part of this experience was a significant catalyst to the work that I do now, which is around really progressive and out-of-the-box thinking as it relates to leadership. But one of the things that we need to do sometimes is go backwards and just kind of look at where we were. And you think about safety, right? And in fact, when I started my business, I started in safety. That's where I began. But you think about where we were, you know, in the really, really early days, it was, you know, fend for yourself, look after yourself, hopefully you don't get hurt today. And then things have progressed, obviously, where we, you know, ended up with lots of PPE and then program manuals and now we have very sophisticated systems for our safety initiatives. But things are really changing. But one of the challenges that we're seeing across North America is our safety records aren't changing very much. And that's a huge concern for a lot of us. And sometimes we find ourselves using we still are today, this is a model that most of us are still using, And if you're, and so we're measuring outcomes. We're looking at incidences. How much time are we spending at that, right at the incident rate, right at those lagging indicators, versus how much time we're sort of moving away from it and saying, well, no, we have to really look at causes, and we need to step back and start really looking at those leading indicators. And in the safety world, we talk about that all the time. There's nothing new here. However, how far are we willing to step away from the actual incidences and look at our leadership and say, what's the dots? How do we connect the dots between what's actually happening in our industries with our people, with the individuals getting injured, and our leadership? And how are we connecting those dots? And so for me, that was really the curious thing, was to be able to say, we need to step way far back from what's actually going on to analyze and look at what we do from a leadership perspective. When I started my business 13 years ago, I made this decision that I think it was 2001 or 2002 when I started my business, and I thought that I was going to work in the field of wellness. I wanted to be, organizational wellness was my thing. And so I would say to people, very naive, brand new business owner, and I would say to people, they'd ask, what do you do, what do you do? And you have to learn your 30-second elevator speech. And I would say to people, I'm in organizational wellness. And they would say, oh, so like you do Pilates and yoga at lunch? And I was like, no, I don't even know what Pilates is back then. I had absolutely no idea. But here's the thing about business. We grabbed onto what I think is the low-hanging fruit. We said, well, it's really easy. Let's do the wellness piece. And a lot of it was driven by insurance companies, which is a good thing. If we can keep people healthy, if we can get people to lose weight, if we can get people going to the gym and quitting smoking, guess what? They're going to recover faster if they happen to get ill, and they're going to be in better shape. And that's good for business, and it's certainly good for our bottom line. But we still weren't willing back then to really look at one of the fundamental drivers of our organizational success, and that was really, what are we doing with our relationships at work, and how are we engaging people in a meaningful way? And the fact of the matter is, there's tons of research. We are evolving. And I do a lot of work with across Canada with psychometric tools, and we know that we have processes and procedures, and we're really left brain driven, and we have great engineering mechanisms to help us. However, most of us believe that we don't actually have any tools, really good tools, to help us deal through those challenging relationships and the emotional intelligence that's required to be successful. And when we look at what's been happening over the last 20 years, there's some interesting research out there. If anyone's interested, you can Google Dumb Down. There's been a couple of articles written in Maclean's magazine called Dumb Down. There's been 2 updates since the original one that came out in around 2007. And they've been doing research on the brain, and the brain is actually starting to change. It's actually starting to rewire itself. The other thing is there's sort of some indications, early research, that the young people coming into the workforce today, not only is the brain rewiring, but they actually tend to have more of an intuitive, a right brain process. And so when we think about our 100-year-old business model, we've really been focused on that left brain piece. The technical stuff. And the reason for that, and I think most of us would agree, that it is sometimes the easier piece, because we can be very detached from it. It's easy to be detached from a mechanistic approach. And it's prickly to stand in who we are as a leader, who we are as a person, who we are as a safety professional. That can sometimes be very prickly. And I coach hundreds of people across the country. And it's one of the most challenging things that a leader can do, is stand in their own skin and say, what's working for me and what's not working for me? So some of this research is really, really interesting. And if we believe that, and how many of you here actually believe that the employees you're bringing in, the younger employees, are different from you? Right? We all, like most of us, and it's funny because we get companies saying to us all the time things like, we've been running all these weird programs to try to get them to assimilate into our business, but it's not working. We've been trying for 5 years, and they just don't seem to want to come along. And we often get people saying, every generation was like this. Just think back to the 60s, and all the hippies out there, and they weren't going to, they weren't going to assimilate, and they weren't going to get into our business model, and they were, very, very radical in their thinking. And yet what happened, right, for those of you in the room that are baby boomers like me, you absolutely did assimilate. You got in, you got the paycheck, you got the money, you became a consumer, and life went on. But there is a fundamental, we're seeing and feeling, more importantly, a fundamental difference with the young people coming into our workplace. And some of the research would indicate, if you look back at the Gallup work, I mean, we know that many years ago, one of the first studies, one of the best studies that came out, one of the key pieces of information that came from that was that the #1 reason people left their employer was a relationship with their supervisor. They actually quit their supervisor. They didn't quit the company, they didn't quit the work, they quit their supervisor. Well, that's pretty interesting information. Now we fast forward to 2007 and 2008 when the Towers and Perrin Global Workforce Study comes out, and it actually starts to expand what we know about why people leave their organization, right? And it starts to appear through this research that we're actually quitting our organization. There's no connection, there's no alignment, there's no reason for me to get up other than a paycheck, right? And I get challenged all the time when I work in Alberta because they say, you don't know Alberta, Yvonne, you know, that we are driven by money in Alberta compared to other provinces, and that may be true, but I still believe that at the core, and the research would indicate, at the core we're all human beings, and so many of us are driven by a lot more than just a great paycheck. So one of the things that these studies say is that we have to actually be able to stand in our employees' shoes. We have to actually feel what it's like to be them. We have to be able to really understand what is their experience when they come to work. What does that look like?